Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, December 14th, and you are listening or watching another edition of Forward Maryland. My name is Bill Woodcock.
And I'm Jason Booms.
And Jason, just minutes ago, I saw that Joe Biden was elected president. Wolf Blitzer went on and announced it. And I seem to have remembered this same thing happened on November the 7th. What's going on?
Well, I'm not sure if that's true because there's right now, as we speak, an alternate slate of electors off of Green Mountain Circle gathering to defend their rights to do, I'm not sure exactly what, but they're serious about it. But yeah, it was good seeing Joe Biden win for the 100th time.
And I suspect that there will be about 30 or 40 more times before January the 6th when the results of the Electoral College are read.
Sounds about right.
So fortunately, the Trump administration and his ilk and his minions have not filed suit in Howard County. Oh, what an awkward transition that was. Or anywhere in Maryland, because Maryland was reliably blue. And Howard County is blessed by an incredible elected official who currently serves as the Howard County State's Attorney. And we're honored to have Rich Gibson as our guest tonight. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Rich, he was a graduate of Howard. He is a graduate of Howard University Law School in 2003. He has served in the state's attorney's offices in Prince George's County and also in Baltimore City before becoming elected to the office of Howard County State's Attorney in 2018. The first African American to hold that post. And on January 7th, Rich actually hits the midway mark of his first term. Perhaps we will get some news tonight in terms of 2022 plans, but I'm not counting on it. But I am welcoming this evening Howard County State's Attorney Rich Gibson. Rich, welcome to the podcast.
Honored to be here. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. So a few weeks shy of 2 years in office. What surprised you about the job so far? How are you finding it? You've had a lot of experience before you came into the office and in other jurisdictions. What's your take of the job so far?
So first off, the job is amazing. Not a day goes by that I'm not grateful for the trust the community's put in me in giving me this opportunity to lead in this way. I love criminal justice. I'm a career prosecutor. And so I'm dedicated to this position. As far as 2022, there's no surprises. I'll be running for this office again. I mean, I can announce that clearly. That's not a problem at all. So I'm definitely committed to this position. I'm committed to the work that we do and the change that we can make in the community. And I'm grateful that Howard County gave me this opportunity. It's such a blessing. Yeah, there are challenges. No 2 days are the same. And I would say that I am a more than competent trial attorney. So I've learned how to try cases, but I wasn't put in power to try cases per se. I still do take cases, but I'm put in power to effect a vision and to run an office. And that has been a real challenge. It's been, a great challenge, managing a budget. You have roughly $10 million budget, 76 employees, and your policy setting for those employees. There was no policy manual. So when I got into office, I was surprised that there's no actual structure in place. I had to create that during my first year. You're handling personnel issues between employees. There's a lot of interorganizational planning. So we work closely with the courts, the police, public defender's office, the sheriff's office, Howard County Public Schools, the judiciary, as I said, the courts, county executive. So you're working with all these different agencies collaboratively, and that's a lot of fun and a challenge as well at like a macro level. There's also a legislative aspect to the job. So I've testified on bills and going down to Annapolis, testified in favor of a long gun bill that Delegate Atterbury put in, offered written testimony in favor of putting cameras in special ed classrooms in the county, testified against changes in felony murder, the felony murder rule, and I offered testimony in favor of body-worn camera. And I was actually lucky enough to be appointed the chair of, or president rather, of the Maryland States Attorneys Association Committee for Police and Prosecutorial Reforms. And so you get a chance to actually impact things on a state level from that position as well. It's been great. You know, COVID does throw a wrench in things though, but it's been great.
So I remember when I interviewed you for my blog several years ago.
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Starbucks location at a Winter's Run. I think it's now Regionale Sandwich Emporium. And I remember you telling me about how activist you thought that the state's attorney's role really could and in fact should be, given its scope and how it touches almost every aspect of county life. And it sounds like you're making the office exactly that.
That's you know, I wasn't just tossing out platitude. I believe that. You know, I believe the prosecutor's office is a change agency in our community, and you can do a lot of great things if you're proactive. And I believe in being proactive, and I truly appreciate the opportunity the community's given me.
Yeah. So you touched on it a little bit at the end of your answer, and so before I kick it over to Jason, this year is, of course, would be remiss in asking, year like no other. I know that the court system in Maryland had been, going through reopening and had gone through a few phases and then had to roll those back. How's the pandemic affected the work of your office, and how have you mitigated the circumstances?
So, I mean, it's really challenging, and from a leadership perspective, it's especially challenging because there's not like a precedent to follow. There's no playbook in place. So everyone who's leading right now is flying the plane while they're building the plane. And so you have this sense of like a lack of precedence, and you've got to, for me, I'm following the science. And so, we got digital thermometers, and we have 76 personnel, as I said, in my office. We changed how many people are in the office, allow people to work from home. So we pared it down to roughly 10 or 12 or so people versus the 76 at a given time. Thus, if there was a breakout or if there's an outbreak rather in the office, it would be hopefully contained. So it wouldn't spread throughout the entire office. It would shut down. I'd like to avoid that if I can. So we have thermometers, there's gloves, there's hand sanitizer, there's a mask policy we put in place. We had to change grand jury and how grand jury operates because we had a space for 23 people to gather, but not a space for 23 people to gather socially distanced. So we had to procure a new space for that to take place. And we were able to do that, luckily, with the help of some other agencies that I will not name at this point in time. But with the help of some other agencies, we were able to find a safe, secret location where we can safely house our grand jurors so that we can continue to process, because crime doesn't stop because of a pandemic. Like, crime continues, and we have to continue to meet the demands of the community.
That is fantastic. And having been an alumnus of the Howard County Grand Jury, I would be thankful, because I know those rooms are a little small.
Yeah. We found a space that's large enough to keep everybody safe.
Jason, over to you.
Thanks, Bill. Rich, I want to first touch on a couple of policy questions. I know you've given an interview on the defunding the police movement. I think the key animating principle for a lot of those calling for similar initiatives would be about restoring local control, community control over their local police, and just having an ability to ensure that they're acting in a way that's consistent with proper public service. I know you've expressed, I think it might be fair to say you've expressed some concerns about that. I would just like to hear from you directly what your thoughts are on the defund the police movement, what they have right, and or perhaps what areas you might quibble with.
So I think nomenclature matters. I think that the term defund the police means different things to different people, right? And so for some individuals, defund the police is a literal statement of what they believe would be good policy, taking the funding that exists for our police force, depleting it completely and putting it into other places. That would be extraordinarily dangerous. Part of my job is to examine firsthand the full darkness of humanity that's displayed within a given jurisdiction, in this case, Howard County. And there's really serious things that happen here. We're a safe community. We have less crime than almost any other community around us. But that being said, horrible things do happen here. There are child predators that I see regularly. There's sex offenses, domestic violence, attempted murders, robberies. We have all the same issues of every other space, just less of it. You need the police force out there to address those issues. We can have a conversation about reasonable reforms. And in fact, I've been a leader on that. Part of my position as chair of the police prosecutorial reforms for the entire state, for our 24 prosecutors in the state, was in fact coming up with policy positions that body worn camera, it's going to be kind of technical, but Giglio standards, standardizing Giglio across the state, implicit bias training, things that we think make sense, that we should bring to bear to ensure that we have a more fair system. I'm all for it. I'm a Democrat. I'm progressive. I'm not of a mindset that says that depleting the police is a good thing. It would be disastrous. It would be absolutely, objectively disastrous for our community.
Well, I'm just curious. Oh, and just one thing. I laughed briefly there because when you mentioned that Howard County generally a safe community, I can think of one Facebook group that may take serious issue with that, but we're not going to talk about that group today. They're not worth our time. But as far as, so let me ask you this, just roughly what percentage of those who you think that, based on your experience and what you've seen, read, or heard, what percentage of those do you think that support the defund the police movement are for a total liquidation of police funding?
It would be hard for me to put a percentage on it. Again, I think the nomenclature matters. If you talked about reimagining the police or examining the way in which we spend funds. I mean, again, in Howard County, applying it locally to like what our actual facts are. If you look at your tax bill, the police department is already defunded from that perspective. We're receiving, public schools get the lion's share of the funding for our tax dollars. And in terms of your tax bill, you're going to see public safety, not police, public safety, right? That's the courts, that's my office, that's the sheriff's office, that's EMTs, that's the police force, fire, and all of that is getting 12 cents, I believe, out of every dollar. All right. So look at your tax bill, and then, I'm all for having a conversation, but let's have the same facts, right? And I believe in not alternate facts or other facts, they're just facts. There are things that are objectively true and things that are not. And, you're entitled to your opinions, but you're not entitled to your facts.
I do want to follow up with one question, again, in the law enforcement realm. Back in April, I think your office released a statement talking about scams that were taking place, particularly those attached to COVID-19 efforts. Having engaged in some research in certain communities across the country, I am finding that those who are seeking out help often are running into scams. I've seen that in some border states and some other areas on a recent research project. Are you still seeing that in Howard County? Are you the same number of scams that were popping up when COVID, really had its first significant outbreak, or is that diminished?
It has diminished somewhat. There's what I'm going to call a steady trickle, quote unquote, of like economic crimes where individuals are trying to take advantage of them, and it rises to an individual trying to take advantage of a victim, and it rises to a criminal level. You see that with home improvement projects occasionally. You see that with it could be like, I'll pave your driveway kind of things, or I'll do your roofing, but it's all like a bait and switch kind of take your money thing. Some of that stuff is more appropriately handled by the Attorney General's office because it's more civil, but occasionally we get involved if it's criminal in nature. Like if it's just a straight up, we had one a few years back where someone claimed to be doing a tree work, and they were giving a special for the tree work, and they claimed that there was, if I recall correctly, there were worms eating away at this person's tree, and it was infecting all the trees in their area. And if they cut them all down, there were no worms. There's no arborist that said that. It was all just trying to fleece someone of their funding. And this person happened to be an elderly person. So we looked at that as like an elder abuse situation. Like you're taking advantage of someone who, may not have the same resources or same comfort level of reaching out. And they're a little more vulnerable because they're older. And that kind of thing is disturbing. And we're going to take that very seriously. So we do see that occasionally, like there's a steady trickle of those kind of cases. Not so much COVID scams at the moment. COVID has created some other issues that we look at. So especially when it comes to children and our elders, the way that we discern problems is through social contact. So, little Johnny goes to the doctor's office and there's bruising on his private area, and the doctor inquires as to why. And they're a mandatory reporter. So they're going to tell law enforcement, something doesn't look right here, please investigate. And then we kind of investigate. Teacher sees student at school and sees that the student's got a black eye, same thing, right? Because we're not meeting collectively in those spaces, right? Grandma's in a nursing home, but no one can get in to see her. And now she's, you don't get to see that she's got bed sores all over her body because they're not treating her properly. These are the kind of things that are criminal, and they don't go, they go undetected with greater frequency during this kind of shutdown because we're just isolated. We're more societally shut in. And so we're seeing those kind of things. And we're trying to guard against those kind of things because they're particularly serious from our perspective.
All right, good to hear. I have a couple more, but I think I'll hold those off because that's going to segue into a different topic that's more electoral in focus. So Bill, I'll kick it back over to you.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So hitting around the halfway point of our time with you tonight, Rich, I want to pick up on something that Jason was asking, because the other side of another facet of Summer's attention to policing issues also had to do with social justice reform. And I'm interested in, there was such a long list of things that you were working on in your office and had been doing for the last 2 years. What have you been doing with maybe educating your office or more actively doing in the areas of social justice, diversity and inclusion? I know, again, it was a thing that we talked about a few years ago when you were running for this office, and the historic nature of the elections, not just yourself, but the county executive, the sheriff, speak to those issues coming to the fore in Howard County. So what have you been up to in that area?
Sure. I want to be really clear. I think that it's very dangerous to try to capture the moment or ride the moment. I think what you want to do, you want your decisions to be timeless and not timely. Yes. So your choices should reflect, regardless of the moment in time, looking back on it, your choices, your decisions, your judgment should be able to stand up to scrutiny whenever, as a regard of just like chasing the moment kind of thing. I believe diversity, especially in positions like prosecution, especially in law enforcement, but in every position, the science is clear that diverse environments lead to better judgments. I think in terms of prosecution and law enforcement, it's really important that you have people that reflect the full spectrum of what's represented in the community in the room, at the table, being able to add their 2 cents, point out issues that you might be numb to or miss because you don't reflect their perspective. And so I really believe in diversity. That being said, when I took office, my goal was not to, deplete the office and fire all the attorneys that are there committed to justice. And, you're selective, you figure out who's a problem or who may have issues, and you remove those things very surgically and you bring in people accordingly. But the vast majority of people in the office are just trying to do a job, and you're trying to steer them in a proper direction. In terms of steps I've taken, in terms of hiring, I want us to better reflect the community. I've hired African-American attorneys. I've hired people of Indian descent, hired people of Middle Eastern descent. I hired someone of Korean descent who actually speaks Korean. I hired a Latina at my executive level. She's someone who helps guide me every day in terms of the judgments that we make and the things we do when we face with the community. And so I do believe in diversity, and I have made the environment more diverse, but I'm not we're intentional with our diversity. So when we're hiring, if there's a white male candidate who's exceptional and they're the best candidate, I'm hiring that person, right? That's not a question. What often happens, however, is that you have 3 candidates, right, that are all exceptional. Like each one is going to bring something spectacular to bear in the office, and they're going to be a real asset organizationally. If you have these 3 candidates and you're trying to choose one, at that level, when they're all kind of co-equals, the question is, do any of these candidates reflect a aspect of our society that isn't reflected in the space that we're working in? And what's that intangible worth? And that intangible is worth a lot to me, because again, you have those perspectives there. They can point out something that you might miss because you're just numb to it. You have implicit bias. Speaking of implicit bias, switching topics somewhat, one of the things that I was lucky enough to be able to talk with the Maryland State's Attorneys Association, we decided that we wanted to have an implicit bias program geared for prosecutors, not just generic implicit bias, but something that's actually, like, not all trainings are created equal. You can have a training, but does the training speak to your space, and does it reflect your needs, or is it just something that's kind of like shoehorned in, like square peg, round hole type of logic? And I wanted to make sure that we had a training that reflected our needs as prosecutors that spoke to implicit bias. So I worked with MSAA, Maryland State's Attorneys Association, and they have a huge network. And Steve Kroll is the president of that organization. He was able to reach out to the University of Maryland and was able to get Professor Russell McLean. Professor Russell McLean is a Howard County resident, which is great for us. And he happens to also be a nationally recognized expert. He's done trainings all over the country on implicit bias. And he designed a program for us that was mandatory training for my employees that we had this just a month or so ago. And it was, it's really beneficial to have that level of specificity tweaked directly to our needs. So yeah, those are the kind of things that I'm doing to affect the kind of changes that are consistent with social justice reform,
Right.
but more importantly, are just good decisions. Like, they're just fundamentally solid decisions, regardless of the moment you happen to be in.
A quick question just related to the trainings. Have you, since the trainings have taken place, have you seen any lessons learned being put into practice as a result?
So we're actually in a weird space, Jason, because as Bill alluded to earlier, our courts have kind of shut down. So we actually had the benefit of being able to get, prosecutors are very busy doing stuff, and our support staff are very busy doing all kinds of things. We are, in order to do this job well, you got to be able to juggle multiple balls, proverbial balls. And so luckily, because the courts are kind of at an impasse where we're at like a junction where COVID has kind of ground things to a halt. We only had one courtroom, even when we were operating, right? At full capacity in circuit court, we only had one courtroom that was large enough to actually have a jury trial in safely, which is courtroom 1. It's our biggest courtroom. So we have 5 circuit court judges and 5 district court judges. Of the 5 circuit court judges, there's only one courtroom that you could do anything in. So you're kind of at a loggerhead. So to say that is it measurable at this juncture? No, unfortunately it's not, because we haven't had a chance to really see it in action. We are evaluating cases, of course, every day. And that happens regularly, but in terms of actually seeing it, like, where rubber meets the road is trial prep, plea offers, issue spotting. Those are the kind of things that we're like, you actually see the analysis, and where new strains of thought can alter the analysis. And we haven't really had a chance to really explore that fully, because courts have been sort of, for lack of better words, at an impasse.
Gotcha.
No pun intended, of course. A little legal humor there.
Yeah, yes.
But I appreciate your answer to the question, Rich, because I agree with you that I think, wizened decisions influenced by the events of the day, but not controlled by them, do wind up being more enduring and timeless, and wind up leaving a legacy. And I think I know you well enough to know that you want your decisions and you want your things that you've done in the office to be enduring, and not flip the office one way or the other as new people come in. And hopefully it'll be a long time before we have a new state's attorney in Howard County.
That's the plan.
But that said, and I guess I think this might dovetail into Jason's questions about electoral issues. The state's attorney's office is a partisan election. Lots of attention this year given to the Board of Education elections, and quote unquote partisan elections. I think we're going to have every 2 years arguments in this community about partisan elections. Where do you come down on that, on the issue of elections for the courthouse offices, your position, register of wills, clerk of court, judge of the orphans court?
I think that it's not any different. My opinion is not any different than the school situation, honestly. If something is impacted by politics, it is inherently partisan. Calling it nonpartisan doesn't change what it is. A duck is a duck. If it quacks and it's got webbed feet and it swims in the water most of the time and it lays eggs, it's probably it's a duck, right? And so the position is driven by values, right? Your choices you make are driven by values, and your prioritization of values is often reflected in your political affiliation, right? I look at, if you look at the school issue, Betsy DeVos is, a very Republican pick for, the head of the education system for our government. But, as Secretary of Education, she doesn't really reflect Democratic values. So there are a lot of Democrats that would take issue with her philosophies on education. It's political. Certainly, the prosecutors in a given community are going to act in ways that reflect their values, and so it is a political position. It's inherently partisan. When you evaluate a case, you're supposed to apply the law and the facts, but then you set policies. What are your views on, marijuana prosecutions? What are your views on offers you make? What's your views on restorative justice? All of these things are impacted by your politics, right? And certainly a Democrat will give answers that a Republican would most likely not give.
Jason?
Actually, I want to stay with the drug thing for a minute, because I upon doing my research prior to today's conversation, I looked up, I believe it was from early 2018, and Rich, you were talking about some of the things you're hoping your office would tackle if you were to win. And one of the things that popped up was dealing with drug issues with adults, with addiction issues. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been on those issues since taking office?
So the opioid epidemic has had, especially COVID, so you can talk about that directly. The opioid epidemic is a problem, period. That problem is certainly exacerbated by the stress that accompanies a pandemic and a shutdown. In terms of the numbers, you're seeing, we have interventions, right, that you can take to kind of keep you alive, to stop you from overdosing. But so what you're seeing is we're seeing the numbers drop, but the number of people that are overdosing increase. And one of the problems in terms of the fatalities that we're seeing is that people are using alone now. So typically speaking, you might have a buddy with you. And if you were to overdose, someone could pick up the phone and call for help. We have Good Samaritan laws. So you wouldn't necessarily be prosecuted, and you could actually get the assistance you need to save a life, right? When you use alone, if you overdose, there's no one to call for help, right? That's a problem. Additionally, the way people are buying drugs has changed. So you would normally, because you're socially active, you could buy a small amount, use it, and then go out and buy some more. People are sort of buying like the Costco version of opioids now, because they're stockpiling because they can't go out as often. They can't go out as frequently. And that can lead to overdoses as well. Additionally, fentanyl is so very potent. It's if you were to shake out a couple grams of salt onto your hand, that much could kill you. And people aren't always aware of what it is they're taking, right? There's what they call scrambles. So you've got all kinds of drugs kind of mixed together, and they take that to get to escape from their reality and get a high, I suppose. So the addiction issue is complicated, and this environment certainly isn't making it any easier. So we are seeing those kind of problems. And, my goal would be to try to, treat people as humans, treat people as they are. If they're ready to make a change, I'm willing to work with them. I don't know if you can really prosecute your way through the problem. You've got to look at like the dealers and the people that are kind of distributing it. I like to go up the chain. You also have pill mills. There are doctors' offices and things like that that we're actually looking at as well, without going too far into details because I don't want to do that right now on a recorded conversation. But there are people that distribute pills rather with little regard for the collateral impacts of what they're doing, what they're prescribing, and that's a problem too. And so, look, the opioid epidemic it's horrific.
And still there, even though everyone's talking about COVID, because that is the number one public health issue, opioids, yes, definitely cannot be forgotten. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you very quickly. We're seeing some movement, at least at the federal level, as far as legislative perceptions and actions regarding marijuana. Just so friends of the show would know, where do you stand on issues pertaining to marijuana and prosecution?
I think that there are better things for us to focus on. I mean, I'll enforce the law, but there are more important things for us to focus on. Resources are finite, and I do understand it's a gateway drug. I do understand that it can be used as a stepping stone to something harder and more dangerous. In the same breath, I do understand that a person who's just smoking some weed in order to, I guess, have that escape, or just to lighten their mood or whatever motivates them for smoking it, is not like criminal of the year, right? And so I'm all for reprioritizing our resources, but I will follow the law.
And I do have one more question for you that is strictly, I think, more electoral in nature. Let's go back to 2014 and your first run for the SA office. Unsuccessful, but we learned a lot from our losses. What were the big takeaways that you had after that campaign?
I mean, losing is that's where you get tested, right? Like when you lose, how do you handle that loss? And there's no shame in any approach you take. Some people just say, look, it's not for me. I'm going to pack it up and call it a day. Other people go back at it. It was a family decision. I mean, I have my wife's a doctor. She's got her own career, and I have 3 little ones at home. And so, it's a lot, right? So running for office it's a lot. It's fiscally your time, your treasure, your resources, you're just pouring everything you got into it. And it's a hard thing to lose. That being said, I learned the power of the Democratic network, right? I learned lessons about messaging. I learned, how you lose matters. So I wasn't someone, Dario beat me. I didn't flip the table. I didn't go screaming and pouting. I said, okay, these things happen and I'll be back in 2018. And so, I think that approach probably endeared me to some folks that actually kind of helped me make the connections I need to make over those next 4 years. I didn't go away. I stayed, in the mix. Got involved with the Columbia Democratic Club, was on their board. Got involved with the Central Committee, was an appointed member of the Central Committee. So I got very involved in the actual Democratic machine, learned about how that operates and how that works. And it's important in understanding in any space, you should understand how the party system actually, how the sausage is made, as it were. And that's kind of very, very helpful. It was helpful to me. And took all those experiences and, reapplied them to running in 2018. And the result was thankfully different.
And resilience pays off. I do remember you were very active in 2014, before 2014 and after 2014. I do recall that quite well. So awesome. Bill, back to you.
Rich, this has been a wonderful conversation, but all good things must come to an end. And we are at about the end of our time with you. But I want to give you the floor for any closing thoughts, anything you want the people to, residents, or friends, Jason lovingly put it, friends of the show, to know about you, your office, anything. Sure.
I mean, I can tell you that we've accomplished a lot over the last 2 years, and there's more to be done. This is a job that's always evolving. There's always like more you can do. And so we put up a website. If anyone wants to reach me, It's www.howardcountysao.org, www.howardcountysao.org. For those that are more old school, you can pick up the phone and call 410-313-2108. And it won't be my direct line, but you'll get to me and I answer my messages. And, we're available on Facebook, Twitter. I think we have a YouTube channel. In terms of upcoming stuff, one of the things that I'm working on, hopefully within 2021, hopefully, we'll be bringing the LEAD program, the Law Assisted Diversion Program, to Howard County. I've been partnering with the police, the sheriff's office, Department of Health. It's a diversionary program that's been successfully deployed in other jurisdictions. We're trying to deploy it here in Howard County. And what's great about it is it diverts completely from the court system totally. So the person would never, if someone is appropriate for this program, which is if there's someone who we can either having drug problems, but they're ready to make a change, they're stealing, but their theft is related to like getting a job or something along those lines. They don't really have a long record. As opposed to criminalizing that person at all, the police officer will make a call to us. We will, talk back and forth and quickly confer. We will then do a handoff with a caseworker who will marry that person to the services that they actually need. And so long as they do well, they'll never be charged. Nothing will ever happen. It just into the ether it would go. And it sort of divests people from the criminal justice system altogether. It's a great program. It's worked elsewhere. I don't see why it wouldn't work here.
I do have one question to that. My apologies.
Sure.
I remembered it. I was reading the other day about, it seems to be there's been an uptick in cases of shoplifting, like grocery stores, people are trying to feed their families given all the economic disarray that's taken place in the country. Would this program cover such people who may have, borrowed some bread?
Yes. I mean, and look, there's always we have a great deal of prosecutors have a great deal of discretion, period. So, we are evaluating, is the criminal justice system is a solution. It's not always the solution, nor is it always the best solution. There are times when it is, and I have zero problems launching somebody if they've done something wrong and they're unrepentant. They're just going to be a problem forever. Well, we have a solution for you. Conversely, if you're somebody who can be reformed and you're someone who, you made a mistake, but it's a reasonable mistake and it's for, understandable reasons, or you're someone who's just slipping and just need a little support, maybe we don't need to criminalize that person, because there are a lot of collateral consequences that come with convictions that we have to be mindful of as a society. You're talking about whether someone gets student loans, business loans, whether they can go to the military, or they can get certain housing and certain jobs. It really is a heavy burden to bear. Now, some people have earned that burden, and I have no problem saddling people who've earned that burden with that weight. But for those that maybe they made a misstep, well, they don't need that burden to complicate their existence, and they can kind of be a positive contributing member of society without that burden. And I'm all for giving them that chance.
Great. Excellent.
Rich, thank you for your time, and thank you for everything that you have done to modernize the state's attorney's office. And my estimation, it's not just bringing it into the 2020s, it was bringing it into the 21st century. And I think you've done an amazing job so far. So thank you for being a great guest, and I hope you'll consider coming on again.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Jason, anything in closing?
No closing words, I guess, other than I'm really looking forward to the game tonight.
Indeed. Go Ravens. And we will be coming at you in 2 weeks for the first annual Forward Maryland Best of Show. So the best, the worst, certainly the ugliest of the year 2020. And will be brought to you with all the aplomb that only Jason and I could muster. So be sure to tune in however you choose. And for Jason Booz, my name is Bill Woodcock. You have been watching Forward Maryland. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.